Hello and welcome to this video presentation. My name is Paul Brett. I'm a Senior Software Support Analyst supporting the Transformation Extender product from IBM. The topic for this video is using foreign character sets with ITX and databases. Feel free to reach out to me on popular social media channels at Paul Brett Tech. To correctly validate and map foreign character sets, encoded in UTF-8 for example, it is important to generate the type tree with the appropriate options. So, in Database Interface Designer, you would set the data language property during import. This would be for Native and ODBC Typetree generation. In the design server, there are no options to set. It is imported with native and therefore has to be edited manually. This is of course for JDBC Typetree generation. I'm going to start this demonstration in the ITX Design Studio. As you can see, I have a workspace, and within that workspace one project called SQL Server. On the file system you will note that I have a database query file. I've also generated some skeleton trees and a source map file. We'll come to those later. First thing to do though is open up that database query file. In this database query file we have a query called query3. It is selecting a column called 1 from a table called test3. When I generate the tree for this, I'm going to call it query underscore test3. I'm not going to change the data language option at this time. The tree has been generated. I'm now going to open my map file, and looking at map test3 you can see that I'm using the type tree that I just generated, query underscore test3. There's the one column coming in, and if we have a look at the properties of it you can see that it is currently set to Western Native. Now we're going to write this to an output file. But in the input card we've also got backup turned on, and we're writing that out to a unique backup file. The output file is called output.txt. So if I save, build and run this map, and we'll have a look at the contents on disk first. Now if we have a look at our backup file in Notepad, the word that I've chosen to retrieve from the database looks correct to me. However, if we have a look at the output file, you can see that it is completely messed up. And there's a good reason for this. The backup file, when read into Notepad is UTF-8 aware, and down in the bottom right here you can see that it has recognised this as a UTF-8 file. If we open the file up in a non-UTF aware editor, such as UltraEdit, you can see that the text itself looks like garbage, but this is the UTF-8 representation of the word that I've chosen. In this type tree element, it's reading it in as native. It's then transferring it across to the output side where this object is defined as UTF-8, so a conversion takes place. However, we already know that this data coming from the database is already UTF-8, so that's a double conversion, and it therefore makes no sense whatsoever. Now this is easier to see in an XML file. This is the same map, reads from the database, but this time writes to XML. So if I build and run this map, we'll have a look at what we've got on disk. We've got yet another backup file, but we also have output.xml. And if I open that up in Edge, zoom in a little bit, you can see that that is complete garbage. Again, the Edge browser is UTF-8 aware, and this should display correctly, but it's obviously not correct because there's that double conversion taking place. So let's go back and regenerate that type tree correctly. Back into my database interface designer, and I'm going to right click on my query, generate tree. I'm going to select the same type tree name, query underscore test3. I'm going to choose to overwrite that file, and I'm going to set the language to UTF-8. Ignore the fact that it says deprecated here. We are still completely supporting these type trees. So it says that the file exists. Do you want to continue? I do. The type tree has been recreated. Okay, I'm going to save that file now. And back in the map designer, if I save the map, actually it might be best if I just close the map temporarily and open it again, just to ensure that object is reread. Back into the test3 map, click on the one object, and you can see now that the input type tree says UTF-8 deprecated. So we've got a UTF-8 string coming in to a UTF-8 object, transforming to UTF-8 object, and this is actually a different version of UTF-8. Instead of UTF-8 deprecated, it's the modern interpretation of such. So there will be some translation taking place, but it's UTF-8 to UTF-8. So in theory, we will not get any kind of garbage. So let's build and run this map, and then have a look at what we get on the output. On the output, we've still got the backup. This is still normal. This is exactly what we're expecting to see. And now let's open the output.txt. And now we're getting the correct output in output.txt as seen by Notepad, which has actually recognized it as a UTF-8 file. Again, if we have a look at the raw bytes, it looks like garbage from a raw byte point of view, but the data is stored correctly. And again, we can see this much easier with the XML file. If I build and run this map and refresh my browser view, you can see that the string has come in correctly. Now you might be wondering how I got the data into the table in the first place. Well, here's my insert map. I've put in an index for row 1 on a table type tree that I generated earlier using the database interface designer. And you can see that the one column has been generated as UTF-8 deprecated. The string that I want is put in here nice and plainly. Strings are stored in maps in Unicode, so there'll be a translation from Unicode to UTF-8, but that works perfectly and is inserted into the database correctly. So there we have it. That's how to use the database interface designer import options to create type trees that are suitable for use with diacritic characters stored in UTF-8 encoding. Here we are in the design server. As you can see, I have a project called SQL Server JDBC. Within there I have no schemas currently. Under connections, I have defined a connection called VM16xSQL to point to my SQL Server instance with the JDBC adapter. I'm now going to create a new action. I'm going to execute a query. Here's where I put my query. As you can see, it matches the query from my database interface designer. I'm now going to give the schema a name and generate it. I've given it the same name as I did before with the database interface designer, and you can see there's no other options here at the moment to be able to select a data language. So we generate the schema. The schema has been generated. If we go next and just give this action a name, you'll note in the connections column we have one action defined, but more importantly under schemas we have a schema called query test3, and if we open that and drill down to the one column object, bring up the item properties and click advanced, you will see that the data language is currently set to native. I would manually have to change this from native to UTF-8 to match the capabilities that the map designer used in my earlier part of the demonstration. Obviously, if there are many columns to do, it is rather tedious to do these one at a time, but at the moment there are no options to specify the data language during the import process from the design server GUI. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch my video presentation today. If you found the content interesting and informative, please hit that like button. Perhaps leave me a comment. Consider subscribing to my YouTube channel as I release content such as this on a regular basis. Feel free to reach out to me on popular social media channels at Paul Brett Tech. Thank you.